Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and we're here to preserve and promote culture in this benighted age, one weekly conversation at a time. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show through iTunes, or by plugging our RSS feed into your favorite podcatcher. You can find the RSS feed on our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at VMSPod, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on Spotify, YouTube, and TuneIn.com by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And visit patreon.com/VMSPod or paypal.me/VMSPod to make a one-time or recurring donation and help me continue to produce smart conversation about books, art, comics, and culture every week at the Virtual Memories Show. Happy post-Labor Day. I had a pretty good holiday weekend. Edited a bunch of upcoming episodes, recorded this week's show, bumped into and pitched Patti Smith on recording one. We'll see where that leads. And because we always talk about running here, annihilated my personal record in a 5K race on Sunday morning. That annihilation was good enough for 19th overall out of 150 runners, and second among men in my age group, which meant I got a medal, which was nice. The winner was a 16-year-old kid who was a legend in this town where they had the race. And afterwards, when we saw all the results, I figured out that at the pace he was running, if he could have kept that, he could have actually run an extra mile and still beaten me by 2 seconds. So he could have done 4.1 miles faster than I could have done 3.1. Puts everything in perspective. That said, I cut 75 seconds off my previous best for a 5K run, and this was a much tougher course since a bunch of it was cross country, so conceivably I've still got room to improve. Anyway, that was my holiday. I hope you had a good one too. Now, as I mentioned, I recorded this episode on Saturday. I thought of holding it for later in the month, but I've decided to turn it around right away since it's tied to a screening I went to last week, and I want to get the episode together while all that's fresh in my memory. So our guest this time around is David Shields. And David was on just a few months ago, about 20 episodes back. But he's got two pretty distinct projects this year. Earlier this year, we talked about The Trouble with Men, his book-length essay of The Trouble with Men. This time around, though, he is here to talk about his new documentary, Marshawn Lynch, A History. It's available on Amazon, iTunes, and Vimeo now. Marshawn Lynch, A History is an amazing piece of work. David and his editor managed to assemble an 84-minute montage with no verbal narration about an athlete who made a statement out of not saying anything. See, Lynch is this amazing running back in the NFL who helped carry the Seattle Seahawks to a Super Bowl and could have carried them to a second one, which is part of our conversation and part of the PTSD trauma fallout in Seattle. But he also became legendary for shutting down the press during locker room interviews and post-game press conferences. And he had the twin refrains of, I'm just here so I don't get fined, and you know why I'm here, that have sort of reverberated among athletes who no longer want to deal with the absurdity, performing monkey aspect of these press events. And that reverberation is kind of similar to some of Marshawn's touchdown runs, which led to so much stomping by fans in the Seattle stadium that they actually triggered seismographs, because he described his method of play as beast mode. These were known as beast quakes a couple of times over the course of his Seattle career. When it comes to the press conference thing, just this week, Venus Williams pulled a Marshawn at the U.S. Open after she lost, just giving non-answers and staring at the camera until the questions stopped. During our conversation, I refer to it as Serena. I'd misread the article when I saw it, but it's actually Venus Williams who does this after the match. The thing with David's movie, though, it's not just Lynch's history that it goes into, but also his hometown of Oakland, California, and its tradition of resistance and protest. And as I said, there's no verbal narration here. Instead, you get a montage of like 700 or so clips, and it creates this sort of kaleidoscope of impressions, not just Lynch and both his chronological history as a football player and person, but also sports, race, money, patriotism, America in its various guises. You do not have to be a sports fan to dig this, I think. The other people who were there, some of the other people who were at the screening with me were not particularly sports people. You're not going to get some of the resonances, maybe, the way somebody who's invested in these things as a sports fan is, but still, it is a fantastic documentary. So, as I mentioned, and this is pertinent because it's a thing that comes up later in the conversation, at the screening, David and former ESPN host Michael Smith did a Q&A afterwards, and they've done a couple of these. And they told the anecdote. Well, first they noted that David did try to get Lynch to participate in the project. He and his people chose not to, said they wouldn't fight the documentary, but didn't want to participate, which in fact relieved David because he didn't want Marshawn's voice all over something about how Marshawn doesn't actually speak. But when the movie screened in Oakland, where Lynch lives, after the screening ended, Michael Smith was outside with one of Marshawn's managers and some other people, and David went out to see them. They start talking, and all of a sudden, car door opens. Marshawn Lynch steps out and gets, according to Michael, about 3 inches from David's face and asks how the screening went. That's part of the story that we tell here, and it turns into a 10-minute hang out on the sidewalk with all these guys, and it ends with David walking with Marshawn back to his car and Lynch telling him, "You smooth," which will, I imagine, be inscribed on David's grave someday. Anyway, I enjoyed the hell out of Marshawn Lynch: A History. You can watch it. It is on, you can watch on your computer or set-top box via Amazon, iTunes, or Vimeo for just a couple of bucks. So check it out. Now, as caveats go, we recorded at a hotel on the Lower East Side in Manhattan while David was still in town to promote the film. There was standard traffic noise as well as some jackhammering going on earlier in the episode. So there's some audio artifacts from me trying to zap that. It doesn't sound as great as some of my shows, but you get your money back. And then there were sirens, fire trucks, etc. Now here's David's bio. David Shields is the internationally best-selling author of 22 books, including Reality Hunger, a manifesto, named one of the best books of 2010 by more than 30 publications. The Thing About Life is That One Day You'll Be Dead, a New York Times bestseller. Black Planet, finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award. And Other People, Takes and Mistakes, a New York Times Book Review Editor's Choice selection. The film adaptation of I Think You're Totally Wrong, A Quarrel, was released by First Pond Entertainment in 2017. A recipient of Guggenheim and NEA fellowships and a senior contributing editor of Conjunctions, Shields has published essays and stories in the New York Times Magazine, Harper's, Esquire, Yale Review, Salon, Slate, McSweeney's, and Believer. His work has been translated into 24 languages. His new book is The Trouble with Men, Reflections on Sex, Love, Marriage, Porn, and Power, and his new movie is Marshawn Lynch: A History. And now, the second Virtual Memories conversation with David Shields. Can you cheer for a team/athlete who you know has committed horrible, horrible things off field?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah?
I mean...
Do you find it difficult?
I mean, for some reason, the person I came up with was... it's a great place to start, and I rather glibly said yes, but the thing I think of is this great essay of David Grann about Barry Bonds and how much that we love that he's, there's a wonderful line of Kobe Bryant about Richard Sherman. I don't know if you know that famous moment in which Richard Sherman started yelling at Erin Andrews after she tried to interview him 2013 after he had made the play that sent the Seahawks to the Super Bowl. And people tried to unpack it sort of culturally, racially, sexually. And Kobe Bryant called it the awfulness of greatness, which I think is a beautiful phrase. Mm-hmm. You know, the awfulness of greatness, that if you are really great at something, and for a while, say Richard Sherman was a really great professional athlete. I mean, he's still a professional athlete, but
he was way up.
Yeah. Or Barry Bonds, or, it's very Picasso. I mean, I think the awfulness of something and the greatness of something are famously married. I mean, I don't know how great I am or how awful I am, but, I'm very invested in the transgression of art and, in a way, sport, which kind of gets us pretty easy to Marshawn Lynch in a way.
Yeah, the example, though, that I use is less than an immediately off the field thing like an Erin Andrews. I use Jason Kidd as my example. I was a New Jersey Nets fan.
Oh, right.
Jason Kidd gets traded here. We go to the finals 2 years in a row. Everybody cheers and is happy. The reason Jason Kidd got traded is because he punched a hole through the bathroom door to beat up his wife back in Phoenix, and they were a little less tolerant of that in Phoenix and decided to move him out. Cheering became a little problematic.
Exactly.
You could fall back on hey, they're still married, she's put up with it, or they've reconciled, right, whatever this is, it's not my business.
Right.
Or do you apply standards you would probably apply in the workplace to something like that?
What did you do?
It was tough, but we went to the finals 2 years in a row, and I'd never seen anything like that with the Nets, so we cheered and, again, rationalized with his wife is still there, the kid is there with them, I guess. Maybe it raises the further question, which we can get to. Can human beings change? Can we redeem ourselves from, horrible behavior that we've committed? But that's starting on a pretty deep level. We should probably get back to Marshawn Lynch.
No, we could go there. We don't. I mean, I'm a big fan of the idea that human beings don't change. That, Tolstoy said, I'm pretty much the same person I was at age 7. Mm-hmm. And that's Tolstoy. And, I think we talked about my Trump book last time, didn't we?
Not too much because of my job. I try not to talk too extensively about Trump because of the lobbying that I do.
Even Trump has said that. He goes, I'm basically the same person that I was. I think I even quote that I'm the same person I was at age 12. And so if everyone from Trump to Tolstoy says that, I feel like I'm largely the same
It must
person.
Be true.
But anyway, can we change? Not terribly. Obviously, certain behavior can be mitigated, but people, the edges get soft, and I think as people get older, they just sort of lose energy, but they lose malicious and malevolent energy, and so somehow they get praised as, oh, gee, they soften. I just think the air is leaking out.
Yeah, they just don't have the capacity to commit that
exactly. There's a
level of atrocities.
There's a wonderful Chesterton line and also a Rochefoucauld line about that. But in any case, can we cheer? I mean, I think that rationally we would say, oh, no, I'm going to stop watching football. I think, forget if someone asked on Tuesday when you were there, do you still, someone on Monday maybe asked, are you still a fan, after, because, the film I've done previously called Lynch: A History, now called Marshawn Lynch: A History, just to make sure people know who it's about. It's not per se a history of American lynching, although that's part of it, for sure. Yeah. But anyway, can you still root? For instance, come September, I still live in Seattle and LA now, but will I still root for the little Seattle Seahawks in September? I don't know. Just because, the film in many ways is a decimation of the sports media complex of American corporate sports media, So obviously with the sort of left brain part of us, we say this is all silly nonsense. With the right reptilian part of us, we stupidly cheer, whether that's, we all make compromises, I publish a book with a corporate entity that might have connections that I may not applaud, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. That no one here is pure, as they say.
Right. Has there been a moment where you thought of quitting NFL in general?
I mean, it's one of those ironies. Someone pointed out, this friend of mine who's from Cleveland, who may have been there on Tuesday, he said, well, sure, of course that you're still a fan, because Seattle has been good of late. You know what I mean? Whereas he's from the Browns, who it sounds like they may have a good year this year, but he's sort of...
By accident.
Yeah. But it's sort of like... I don't know if you're a Giants fan or...
I was, but I've stopped watching football for about 3 or 4 years
As
now.
a matter of principle, almost.
It's more the gladiatorial thing of partly
Why
there's...
am I rooting for... I mean, it really is...
It's guys turning themselves into
vegetables.
Sausage. Yeah.
I know.
Or vegetables. And I just...
This is ridiculous. I know.
Yeah. And I discovered once I did that, much like when I quit drinking...
It's out.
I gained 3 or 4 hours...
Totally.
On a Sunday, I'm like, holy shit, I can do so much more than
I know,
other
it's
people.
ridiculous. And I think I agree with you. I think this fall, my wife and I could see us, like, I know what you mean, because frankly, as we watch, I have my laptop on, I'm doing email, I'm doing class prep, and so are we really, briefly they were a magical team, and so it was hard not to be part of that sort of rooting thing. And then, frankly, the last 4 years I've been working on the Marshawn Lynch film, and so... with my left hand, I was sort of keeping an eye on new developments in Marshawn Lynch land.
Yeah. And so in that respect, it's that's professional.
Exactly.
In fact, where did Lynch start for you? When did
the project?
The project and the allure of Lynch as a personality or an anti-personality?
Yeah, that's interesting. It started with, for me... it's really for me that when I felt I had to do something was, I think it was 2013 media week leading up to Super Bowl 48, and he's being interviewed by Deion Sanders, who's on the NFL Network, and glimmers of it are in the
documentary.
Film. Yeah. It's 5 minutes of unbelievably magisterial performance art on Lynch's part. Mm-hmm. He's got his sunglasses on, he's got
that hoodie
on, and he has this very lyrical, deep voice. And in 5 minutes, he just ends the interview format as we know it. I mean, there's no interview ever after that. I mean, I'm working on a book called The Very Last Interview, a novel in which I take every interview I've ever done and remix it into nothing but a series of 3,000 questions. I mean, that's a whole separate topic. But I'm very interested, as probably are you, in the allure of interviews and their somewhat absurd lucidity. Like, here you are, you have written a great book. Tell me if you write with a pencil or a pen. Like, it's an attempt for a rational intelligence to understand a primitive appeal. Like, you are a great athlete. How's it going? Like, there's nothing I can say that can help you. You are William Faulkner. How did you write The Sound and the Fury? It's none of your business how I wrote The Sound and the Fury. Like, it's very primitive magical art. There's nothing I could say rationally. Well, I'd get up at 8:30 every morning and I'd look at the woodchuck. Like, does that have? It has nothing to do with it. Anyway, Marshawn Lynch absolutely deconstructs the interview format as we know it, and it's just 5 minutes of magisterial, verbal jujitsu, where he just. And this is toward a sympathetic interview. Deion Sanders,
it's one of the few people
a great
actually,
athlete, and has a very charming sense of humor himself, as Lynch teases him and Deion teases him back, and. It's so rich. And I just said, like, I have to understand how, a 28-year-old man got to the point that he could do this effortlessly. It looks like it's nothing. It takes tremendous chops to do what he did in those 5 minutes. And, if you or your listeners want to look it up, you can find that 5-minute clip.
I think of Serena losing at the U.S. Open a couple of days ago and then just pulling a Lynch.
What did she do?
Just stared. Just gave the...
I'm just here?
Yeah.
Oh
basically,
my God.
Didn't say it explicitly, but just... Why would you ask something like that? And then just start staring into the distance, and for the next 2 minutes, people keep asking things, and she just keeps staring. And this is, to me, it's a day or so after I saw the documentary.
This is pure Lynch.
Yeah. The
influence
influence of that is spreading.
I have to look that up, Gil.
But part of that is...
But did it have any of the the wit of Lynch, or was it more
in Serena's way? It had her charm to it, but it's still all of this.
I mean, was there an overt hostility to it?
There was a sense I just lost.
Why?
I have to sit in front of you press corps people now and talk about how it feels to lose.
White reporters.
Yeah.
And does she answer or not really?
I don't recall her actually giving a firm answer to anything that was asked, like beyond the drinking coffee during breaks in the game and things like that. And she just looked puzzledly at people and then just started staring and just did a Lynch, which I meant would be infuriating if it was in this scenario, but it's entertaining as fuck when it's this televised U.S. Open thing for a woman who's clearly the greatest of all time.
If I just sat here and didn't answer, that would not be...
Yeah, I was afraid you were going to pull one of those,
exactly.
You know why I'm here.
Exactly.
And just stare at me for the rest of the hour.
That would be clever. I don't know. It would either go viral or...
If we were doing it with film, that would work
there
a
you
lot
go.
better. But,
there you go.
But I think part of that ties into the social media world where there's athletes can reach unmediatedly towards their fans now, and they don't need the media complex.
It's a really good point. Does all this happen without the internet, without social media, without Players Tribune? And yet Lynch is relatively non-existent on social media. It's not like he's a big social media guy who's communicating large doses of his reality to his listeners. That's not something.
Yeah, he's just got his own... He's got a narrow circle.
Yeah, and that you may know that earlier book of mine, Reality Hunger. I think he's got serious reality hunger. I mean, he's very devoted to an attempt to be authentic in a culture that is obviously based on simulation. I think he's immensely devoted to feeling real in a culture in which it's hard to feel real. I think that's, in a way, a lot of my core appeal to him. I have reality hunger. Like, I'm really interested in the poeticization of the real, whatever that means. And I think that Lynch is hugely dedicated to the real and doing something magical with it.
So from the Sanders interview, how did you progress into this is the subject, you got that, but now how am I going to build a film around him?
Right.
And did you decide initially, were you thinking initially of prose?
No.
Okay, so it's always because
it basically began, it's kind of a long product. I'll probably not to bore your listeners, but basically, there's this fellow who's an actor-director named James Franco. He was my student at the Warren Wilson MFA low residency program 5, 7, 10 years ago. I forget exactly when. It wasn't 10, but it was a while ago. He and I don't know if you ever looked at that film he and I did called I Think You're Totally Wrong, A Quarrel.
No, I kept putting it off from the first time we spoke this spring, thinking, I'll surely get to it by the time David and I get together
next. Sure, he got
next.
a million things. And he adapted a book I wrote. I co-wrote with Caleb Powell this book called I Think You're Totally Wrong, A Quarrel, which I think is a good book. It's basically a writer and his former student arguing about life and art. And it's just pure dialogue almost entirely. For 200 pages, we argue about how I'm overinvested in art and he's overinvested in life, and I say more life in my life, and he wants more art. Blah blah blah. Anyway, I think it's a good book. Anyway, Franco asked me when he was at Warren Wilson if I had something that could become a film. I said, "Here's this book I'm working on." He said, "This is basically a film script. Let's film it." And then he asked Caleb and me to portray ourselves. That we did this, very, very, very low budget thing that we shot outside LA a few years ago. Came out in 2017. I think it's a good little, kind of, you might say, West Coast version of My Dinner with Andre kind of thing. Yeah. But I think it's good. I mean, that we're so nervous, we're actually good, I think. And so Franco said, well, that seemed to go okay. Let's try do Black Planet. This book I wrote came out in 1999 called Black Planet, Facing Race During an NBA Season. Kind of gets, Jason Kidd is in it, Gary Payton, Sean Kemp, George Karl, Rodney King, O.J. Simpson, Clarence Thomas, tried to look at American race cataclysm through the weird inverted lens of an NBA season in which black players have a kind of power, but kind of not power. And so in a way, it's a weird sort of precursor, I think, of, Trumpian America, Black Lives Matter, Trump resistance. I haven't gone back and reread the book, but people say the book holds up decently well, though it's also dated. Anyway, Franco wanted to make a film of that in some way. He tried a monologue of me talking about it. I don't think it exactly worked. He and I and Keegan-Michael Key talked about the book. That didn't totally work either. So Franco at that point kind of moved on and said, listen, I'm not going to do as many indie projects as I had. I'm kind of out. You can have all the footage and do anything that you want with it. It started to feel dated. I don't know why that material doesn't work, but it doesn't. So I said, I'm still interested in race, sports, media, the rise of Black Lives Matter. I want to do something with this. And then a friend of mine, Michael Logan, just said, my God, Marshawn Lynch is staring us in the face. Let's do that. Because all the same issues, and Marshawn Lynch, of course, and Gary Payton are both from Oakland. That Payton, who's the key figure in that book, this trash-talking Oakland native black superstar athlete who I sort of am obsessed with in that book, it just transferred almost exactly to Marshawn Lynch. But in the Marshawn Lynch film, my whiteness or my fandom or my vicariousness are not at least overtly at stake. It's all about Lynch. That, I think, is a measure of how the culture has changed. Like, nobody's interested in my white ambivalence. At least I'm not. I just wanted to make a rhapsody to Marshawn Lynch or explore it. So that became the film in 2014. I approached Marshawn Lynch and his representatives, and they said, as I may have said on Tuesday, when you were there at the screening, Gil, that thanks for approaching us. You've got to be kidding. There's no way we're going to participate in your movie. That Marshawn Lynch's whole brand, they wouldn't say this, but, his whole point is that he doesn't talk to you. He may do a Pepsi commercial for, $1.5 million or whatever, but he's not going to talk on your terms, So I said, that's fine. He goes, that we won't impede it, that we won't, how do they say it? That we will neither confirm nor deny. Yeah. You probably heard that in your field. And so basically I go, great, fine, I guess. And, I'm quite a remixer. That's so much of the work I do, whether it's Reality Hunger or the Salinger book. I'm interested in taking found footage and remixing it. So necessity being the mother of invention, I said, okay, thanks, you guys, bye. And for the next 4 years, a team and I, especially the lead film editor, James Nugent, and I we worked like crazy to find every clip that we could find about Marshawn Lynch. Then we'd follow our own nose in the sense of, well, this line of Lynch reminds us of another line of Lynch, or a line by Trump or Tucker Carlson here, Stokely Carmichael there. Stokely gets us to Malcolm X, who brings us back to Colin Kaepernick, and that's just for better or worse the way I think, by association. And yet that we follow a little narrative, born and raised and made in Oakland.
You've got, chronology and geography,
exactly.
But also a thematic
Precisely.
tone. I was wondering about how you balance those.
Yeah.
Or how intuitive that was on your part to...
It took us a long time.
Yeah, we have to stick with this chronology structure, but we want to be able to divagate and go into the themes.
It's sort of like this thing I learned in this book I wrote 10 years ago or longer called The Thing About Life Is That One Day You'll Be Dead, which is kind of a free-floating meditation on human mortality and how to exist meaningfully in life when you have zero religious feeling, as I have zero religious feeling. I think that, I just think we're ever so slightly glorified animals. This is all that we have. That when I die, that's there's nothing. That's it. Yeah. That we're not different essentially from, say, caterpillars. We have a certain consciousness, or maybe from, let's say, dolphins.
Well, I'd say the caterpillar thing brings us back to whether people can change. But anyway, go.
That's good. But yeah, exactly. And so. Well, you could argue that,
they're a little more advanced than we are.
Well, the butterfly thing is that, I would say that's art. I'm very interested in the wound and the bow, that, the butterfly aspect of me is to the degree I'm able to create art. So that's a funny thing. How does that happen? How in the world? It's the most...
Code for two completely different sorts of lives.
How could that be? I mean, It's madness. I mean, I don't think there must be footage that shows that, speeded up footage.
Yeah, the whole time-lapse thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, that's crazy. But anyway...
back to materialism.
Yeah. So anyway, I forgot I think the point is that I'm very devoted to collage, but when you have a narrative staring you in the face, don't hesitate to go for it, in the sense that, in the thing about life is that one day you'll be dead. It's a free-floating meditation on mortality, but I take a human body from infancy to their dying bedside, so it's basically, I say, I've got chronology here, don't fight it. So anytime I have a narrative, like in Black Planet, I had an NBA season as a loose chronology. Basically, the point being, I'm already associative as it gets. And some of my books, maybe you could say, open out into too much chaos, or at least a lazy reader might think that. But anyway, I had a wonderful Lynch prodigal son returneth narrative. Oakland, Buffalo, Seattle, Oakland is this perfect circle. And so into that circle I poured a bio arc, a thematic arc, a cultural arc, and it's just, that took a long time to get to.
Well, first, we should note for listeners, there's no overt narrative to it. I think there's just a few moments of, saying that, then he signed with Buffalo. There's just like
But we never say it.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how much of that was lifted from existing footage or whether there was any voiceover to it.
We never do voiceover.
It reminded me of a series that used to be on MTV in the early 90s called Buzz that was 100%, it was a half-hour seemingly freeform documentary that would just use clip upon clip upon clip without any narrative whatsoever, but managed to get to some sort of, I don't want to say epiphany because that would imply a little too much closure to it.
That sounds good.
Yeah, it was amazing, and I haven't looked back at it all these years. They hold up. Yeah,
so, for instance, there might be one about, say, Bill Clinton or something, and it would kind of have a certain theme.
That would even be too specific.
Okay.
It was so vague and so strange. It was one of those like after midnight things on MTV.
Right, where everyone was high.
Yeah, there'd just be these like a talking head from like Argentina and then footage of this, that, and the other. It was the sort of thing you're like, did I just see that? Because it's pre-DVR, so nobody was, digitally sending stuff around.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, and I wasn't
yet,
sure.
Sometimes they struck you as they would sort of come together in some subtle way.
You'd start to see the hand of the editor.
Wow.
Or the writer / editor, however you want to compose it.
I'll definitely take a look. I don't wonder if those will come up. They might.
Presumably somebody has digitized this somewhere and put it up. But yeah, that sense of trying to construct something without using the authorial voice, without an overt voice, given that the subject is somebody who is taking away his own voice deliberately.
Exactly. I was about to make that rather necessary point, the idea of imposing a mission control, authoritarian, white voice upon Marshawn Lynch would have been a disaster, unless it were done mock solemnly. That could work.
Too easy to be misinterpreted.
Yeah. In which I said, and so, having failed in Buffalo, Marshawn Lynch tried anew in a West Coast city, not Oakland, but Seattle. It's like it would have been just death.
The portentous NFL recap voice that would have been perfect. Yeah, if you got that guy who does the replays.
Yeah, that would have been
with the horns and everything in the background. And
I mean, it could work.
But this is better.
But it was very important that in a way, there is that line of Alice Walker, who says, the only thing that white men in America can do is shut up and listen for the next 350 years. That's when she was asked, what can white people do? And I think, in a way, what the movie tries to do is shut up and listen to Marshawn Lynch's silence. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Like, yes, of course, this film, a la this MTV Buzz, has there's a dyer's hand in the editing. Obviously, even a fairly aggressive thematic push to the film. basically how Marshawn Lynch uses silence as a form of undeniable and potent resistance and protest. But yeah, I mean, that we're trying to, as closely as we can, to listen to Marshawn Lynch's eloquence and silence is eloquence. And so that seemed to us pretty obvious from the beginning. A friend of mine, the same guy, Michael Logan, said, don't ever make it feel like you're watching television. Mm-hmm. And also, something that we came up with was sort of that we wanted the 84 minutes, you know, trying to do the math, sort of 700 clips over 84 minutes. Does that mean around 10 clips a minute? I can't quite do the, I guess that's basically it. 9 clips per minute. So that's about right. So that's about 7 seconds per cut. That sounds about right. I think it's even, so it's, you know, every 7 seconds at the very most, it cuts. And so, what was, that we wanted the movie to feel as vital and velocity-driven and violent and surprising and unpredictable as a Marshawn Lynch run. That was always our model. So the film sort of feels like Beastquake 3.0, like, so that, you know, it feels like, you know, at its very best, that I saw something on the web the other day, like, you know, that Marshawn Lynch's Beastquake 2.0 run was declared the best run of, I don't know, certain decade or something. Like, it's remarkable how that you think he's down so many times and he's still running. And the film, that we wanted it to have it never pause, never breathe, never have these, you know, those lulls, those, you know, longueurs, where, you know, for 7 minutes, like, okay, now, you know, even in very good films, there's these parts where it's like, okay, here's the boring part in which the family is setting up the table for the big wedding later. And for the next 2 minutes, they were just getting atmosphere for the family setting up the wedding. And it's like, yes, it gives you a sense of atmosphere, but you're essentially relaxing. And that's maybe a more classical film mode. In a way, our film is, in a way, anti-cinema, a la Godard, you know, that I forget if you were there when
you mentioned the anti-Ken Burns.
Yeah, anti-Ken Burns. But also that my friend and my hero, Ross McAway, who's a very great filmmaker, documentary filmmaker, who called the film a Godardian rant, you know, which I can, you know, pretty much die and go to heaven on. You know, the film is Godardian in that it's anti-gorgeous cinema, in that way, trying to stay true to Marshawn's kind of anti-corporate ethos.
I will say my two major absences, the things that bothered me the most from it, just so you can feel as though there's some criticism. Nothing from his Brooklyn Nine-Nine appearance.
I heard about that. I wonder.
All he does is talk.
Oh, that's hilarious.
That's the thing.
He's like he
won't shut up, but he won't say anything important.
Vesuvius of. Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah, they had to interrogate or just ask him questions because he witnessed
and he won't shut up,
and he won't talk about it. He just keeps talking about quesadillas and just goes on and on. And the person who's
funny.
Yeah, he does a great job.
He's a really good actor.
Oh, he's supposed to be on Westworld next year.
He is.
The other thing you didn't include that killed me because I expected it to fit in somewhere. Charles Barkley's deodorant ad from the 90s that he turns into a race statement. I don't know. It
sounds familiar.
Oh, all it is
might
3
be in
words.
Black Planet.
No more flaky white stuff, Charles says as he's spraying on this deodorant. And it's like he really accentuated white in that one. He made a race statement out of like a right guard ad. That's pretty goddamn impressive. It just fit into the athletes, race, etc.
I know the one that I'm mad that I didn't include. I wonder if Brooklyn Nine-Nine came out.
It was only in the last 2 years or so.
Yeah, I think that we may have locked the film. Although, in a way, it would have been... I'll have to look... Put a note to yourself
I'll
on
make
Brooklyn. The one I should have included, and maybe this was a little obvious. And, you know, you can't include everything in the sense that once we have him making a certain point, like, for instance, we have him doing... Well, I mean, that would have been interesting, because to me, it's important that the film not be like a compendium of Marshawn Lynch's funniest and smartest riffs, like, where's this, where's that? Because someone said, hey, where's the Marshawn thing where he did this. I'm like, hey, you have YouTube, knock yourself out, and you go find it. Like, our film is like, it's more of an argument. Having said that, I wish, like the Brooklyn Nine-Nine, it could have been a funny thing. And at a certain point, we sort of tuned everything out. Like, I don't want any more information coming in, that we have blinders on at this point, and we're just focusing on, the movie. And if someone says, I just found Marshawn Lynch's home movies from age 10 to 20, it was almost as if we said, I can't even look at that because we have to focus. But the Brooklyn Nine-Nine thing I've heard about, but I just haven't looked. But the thing that I wish we had included maybe is that whole, and tell me if you think this is too obvious, that whole trope of Miles Davis turning his back on the audience when he plays trumpet, like that there's a fans, heavily white fan base. And he would, to show, again, going back to, can you love someone's art when they've done famously bad things in their private life? He was a wife abuser, and he was, but that he was the awfulness of greatness. Again, that, and Marshawn Lynch, is, in his own private life has led a rather exemplary life with a few inevitable minor miscues. But, that whole trope of Miles turning his back on the audience is a kind of I'm just here so I don't get fined a little bit. Yeah. That would have been... And don't you think that's a little too obvious, though?
Yeah, because you had the Henry Rollins thing in there
does
already.
It, which is more surprising and better.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And when you mentioned Davis, I'm like, that would have been a neat point, but you actually create a whole another couple of layers by using Rollins.
Exactly, because at first we said, do we want a white guy explaining Black Silence? But the Rollins is so damn good.
Yeah.
He's so good. I know. Thank you for that. Yeah.
I will say that Miles Davis is one of the subjects in Cultural Amnesia, the Clive James book.
Whoa.
And it's an interesting place that James takes it. So I'll get you a copy of the book.
I really would appreciate, not that I couldn't.
No, but I like giving books to people.
What do you have, like 27 copies on your
I
shelf?
keep a bunch, yeah.
Do you really?
Oh, yeah. I just don't want, when it's somebody who's traveling, I don't like to hand them another book. They've got to stuff in their luggage.
So I hope you weren't too hagiographic toward James when you were talking. Like,
oh, no, we rolled.
Or did you just say, I really dig this book? Or did you...
I criticized the fact that his Stefan Zweig chapter deprecates the fiction in favor of Zweig's memoir. My opening question, knowing what a big TV maniac he is, was, besides Game of Thrones, what else do you regret you're going to die before you see the end of? And that just started us on, a much more fun conversation, because he recognized I wasn't going to be so you're facing death. You wrote a poem called Japanese Maple. I'm like, no, let's have some fun with this, because clearly you get enough of this adulation from people. Let's deal with Game of Thrones and your mortality and everything else that will come and after you're gone.
Have you guys stayed in touch at all?
Very little. I try not to, just because
sure.
My whole assumption is that none of you guys have object permanence. The moment I leave the room, you all forget that I ever existed. So it's always a pleasure to me when someone actually stay in touch with.
Did he ever listen and say, hey, that was a good convo? Or?
I don't recall. In the moment he did, which was the most wonderful moment I've had with the show, which is my Reggie Jackson thing, that it was usually I would cut this sort of thing short because my health, etc. I will be knocked out the entire afternoon. I'll be spending upstairs asleep because I'm enjoying this so much. I'm like, okay, that made it all worth it, And then I go to sit down with his wife to discuss Dante, and then Anthea Bell to discuss translations, Zweig, Asterix, and everything else. Again, greatest day of my life outside of the day I proposed to my wife, which is what I always have to make sure people understand that I'm not that much of a monster. Did you have any fear that Lynch would do something horrible and off field sort of thing, that he something terrible would happen and kind of make this project a non-starter?
Interesting. I think he's... there is that wonderful line in the film when he's, I think, a student athlete at Cal, in which they ask him to define his mode of playing. He goes, beast mode, and then he quickly says, on the field.
Yeah.
He had two sort of hit and run. He was carrying a concealed weapon in Culver City, and then outside L.A., and then he had a hit and run in Buffalo. that was, I gather, quickly resolved. And so that, other than that,
yeah,
he's a 33-year-old multi-millionaire black athlete raised in, pretty severe poverty, and he's now this, immensely successful businessman. I don't think of him as being that person who, like, I wasn't doing a biopic of a
6-time convicted.
Trying of who is an athlete, like, who's maybe interesting, but who is constantly violating the law. I mean, he's not that guy. I mean, in a way, he's this kind of, on some level, he's kind of this conservative businessman who's, very much on some level, a kind of capitalist, he's a far more serious capitalist than I am, like, he's really interested in making money, And so that, like, I think I had all kinds of fears that maybe he and his representatives would, I hoped they would work with me. I was afraid they'd work with me. I thought I'd run out of money. I thought the whole fair use approach of the film would come a cropper. I thought maybe they would try and urge me to stop the film. I thought maybe some other legal entity might try and stop the film. I thought the film wouldn't work aesthetically. I thought I wouldn't find a film sales agent. I thought it wouldn't be available on Amazon and iTunes. And we had a million hurdles, a million questions. So far we've survived them all, but among them wasn't like, oh, gee, I worry that Marshawn Lynch will. But even if he did, that would complicate the picture, I would think. That would be interesting. I feel like there's something I did recently in which some drama happened, and that made the book or film better. I'm trying to think of what that was. It reminds me of some project I did in which something happened off screen, and then that actually made the book. Or
Salinger, maybe?
I was trying to think of Salinger. One thing I was thinking of, I wonder if the Salinger, like if Salinger had come out at the time of Me Too, because that book, I don't know if you have read that book.
No, I haven't.
But it's a lot about, there's many threads of it, but among the many threads is Salinger's courtship of very, very young girls, as young as 13 and 14, and it's just a big part of Salinger's fiction and his life. It just is.
Yeah.
And that the book came out in 2013, and it was generally well received and was sort of quietly successful bestseller, but that it didn't blow up entirely. And I swear, if it had come out but anyway, timing's everything. Come out the height of Harvey Weinsteinism, I think it would have really exploded, because it has stuff that I don't think any other book has about his courtship of girls.
When you mention Lynch as capitalist, it sort of undercuts an idea I had about it throughout, which I think came up during the Tuesday Q&A after the screening. Lynch as Bartleby, in terms of I would prefer not to.
Right.
Or, he'll just show up to the press conference, but clearly he would prefer not to.
I know.
Except in Bartleby's case, it's all a shutting down of all the systems around him. The office and everything else falls apart.
Right.
So it doesn't hold up.
That's good. I haven't
does it.
reread. I don't know if I have recently reread Bartleby the Scrivener. That I remember loving that novella, and it's part of American culture. I would prefer not to. There's even, Melville House has those book bags. There's a publisher called Melville House, and they have those book bags. I would prefer not to. And I think it's a part of, among kind of educated America or bookish America, I would prefer not to. People know what that means. And Melville was, I think, living maybe in Lower Manhattan then, and had a crummy job somewhere. He had actually written absurdly Moby Dick, and nobody had read it.
Yeah.
So just madness. And then I think he was like a dock clerk or something, almost literally on Wall Street somewhere. And just, the Bartleby the Scrivener is this huge parable of obviously capitalism and writing, because he's a scrivener, and about fury and silence and all these things. But that's a good point. I forgot that in Bartleby the Scrivener per se, Is that right? He's trying to shut down the office, in effect?
Not trying, but in the process of
effect.
refusing to do anything, everybody has to be on eggshells around him. The office is slowing down. They have to eventually throw him out, and he ends up in debtor's prison.
So it's very Kafkaesque in that sense, almost like The Hunger Artist.
Whereas for Lynch, it's, I'm going to go out in the field and run through a motherfucker's face.
Right.
But, I don't have to be here, performing for you afterwards on mic. So.
That's fascinating. I mean, you're right. It's not an exact analogy, but at one point, believe it or not, that we had there's a film version of Bartleby with Crispin Glover
that makes sense.
as Bartleby. He's a perfect man. That we had a clip of Crispin Glover saying, "I would prefer not to," and we had too overt. Anyway, that we ended up. Not that we have that wonderful Melville epigraph at the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
He's talking about Hawthorne. He says no in thunder, and not even the devil himself can make him say yes, or something like that. And that might be closer to Lynch than Bartleby per se.
Mm-hmm. First time you saw the movie with an audience?
Oh God, no.
What was your reaction? How was your?
You're saying the first time I've seen the movie with an audience?
When you.
I thought you were saying. Was this the first time?
No, but...
I see, first time.
When was the... what was your... How did you feel?
Right. Yeah, how did you feel after you hit that home run slugger?
Do you remember the...
it's been such a... it was sort of like a gradual thing so that, I'd show it to me and my film editor, James, or then maybe we'd show it to my wife and his wife, and it kept on building. I'm trying to think if there was a moment in which like
a screening.
A real screening.
Yeah. Because I'm sure you'd gone through exactly that, all those stages.
I'm trying to think of whether it built. I think it was at. I still get nervous like a proud parent, but I'm trying to think of the first real screening was probably June 3rd, Seattle International Film Festival. Sold out, 600 people. Danny Glover, executive producer, was there to be part of it. Kenny Mayne from ESPN was there. I was there. James Nugent, the film editor, was there. Full, 600 people in a large theater. I'm trying to think of what the reaction was. I was just sort of more focused on very technical things to make sure the sound was right, making sure that the talkback session was going to go. I'm at this point. There's just tiny things in the film I wish we had done slightly differently.
I'm sure there's all little beats and things like that.
It's all about beats.
That's a second too long.
Exactly, that's it. And tiny things, but overall, I always just tell as I watch it, I still like the movie. I can still watch it, and the main thing I like about it is I just tell myself and go, don't stop. The speed of it, I really like the energy of it, the velocity. It never seems to slow down for me. Again, they were never going to do, here are 7 minutes in which that we do the obligatory, and now here's the stuff about Marshawn's childhood or something. It never feels to me, it never feels that conventional to me, So, and I think of what I felt, other than I had trouble reading if people liked it or not. I mean, I think they clearly did. I'm always expecting,
boos and hisses and...
No, I'm expecting roaring standing ovations.
Oh, okay.
And
I thought the self-loathing thing would be more important than the...
No, I was expecting
closet egotism.
Massive applause. And I think the funny thing about showing it in Seattle that first time was that we have that moment when the Seahawks in Super Bowl 49 choose to throw the pass rather than, and the fans people were just saying, they started to boo because they were so...
They still live that moment.
They were just like, please stop showing this clip.
Yeah, you do go over, not overboard, but it really, really hammers home what they did.
Right.
Or what they chose to do.
Yeah.
Do you think that, what conclusion did you draw from that decision to throw a pass that ended up getting intercepted instead of giving it to Lynch? And
I could write a whole book or movie on that. There's so many things. I think there's this phrase someone talked. I wish I could remember the phrase, but basically, there's this huge thing that we all do, which is after the fact, we all state as the blandest of all facts that, of course, that was the wrong thing to do.
That outcome bias.
Perhaps that's a good term, which you know from some of your field. Like on the face of it, it does, like, there's all kinds of ways it could work. Like throwing a pass could work to stop the clock. The reality is Marshawn Lynch does not have the greatest record inside.
Yeah, insanely short yardage situations.
That's not who he is. He's not Earl Campbell. He's not that guy. He's like he already had run the previous play. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a million things they could and should have done. Yeah. And there is outcome bias, if that's the phrase. But and there's all kinds of ways in which an out pattern, a pass to the corner, so that you can throw it away, and then it stops the clock. You have 2 more passes. Or a run, you've got third and fourth, and you actually, frankly, can milk the clock down to almost nothing. But it's like, there's a million, it's fascinating almost, in which you couldn't have calculated a play more likely to not work because, first of all, it's just, it's kind of PTSD for me as I am reliving this, but basically the moment the Seahawks went into this spread offense,
you're already shouting, no!
The Patriots had been practicing this. It was a great play by Malcolm Butler, but the Patriots knew Bill Belichick apparently is indeed an awfully good coach. And, I know he has a huge number of video monitors. People, basically Malcolm Butler had been coached to understand what that what alignment was, what it was, and he cut in so intuitively to it. Apparently that Belichick knew what that play was, and that without having to communicate it to Butler, Butler had been coached up so that he really cut in, and that Richard Lockett, I forget how, but he didn't really fight for the ball. He's not a physical receiver. He's more of a speedster. That Wilson threw it on the wrong side. He threw it to his
back shoulder.
It should have come back here. But my God! And then
I know.
And also, what they should have done, of course, is have this sort of triple option that Wilson could run, that Wilson could pass, or give it to Marshawn. Then you've got It's fascinating. I do think a big part of it was Pete Carroll needed to show to Belichick that he had outcoached him. Who was the smarter dog? Whereas if he hands it to Marshawn, it's like, okay, Marshawn won the Super Bowl. Whereas I think there's an element of Pete Carroll saying, that we threw a slant. It's like, I outcoached Belichick, and now I've won my second Super Bowl. And now, frankly, I'm in the Hall of Fame. And I think, obviously, no one would articulate this, but I swear that is what's interesting. It wasn't Carroll's call, per se. It was Darrell Bevell, the offensive coordinator. But Carroll would hear it, I think, through his headset. Yeah. And
for a moment like that, you have to assume he's still the...
And also what's fascinating is why didn't Wilson... why didn't Wilson audible? Because he was a fairly young quarterback, and also a rather deferential one. There's this wonderful line by Amy Hempel, who has a phrase, "The smart dog obeys, the smarter dog disobeys." Isn't that beautiful?
I've met Amy's dogs, though, so I
do they obey or disobey?
I'm trying to remember. They both seem pretty. The ones I saw were pretty laid back. I was up at Bennington at the low-res MFA. I was just visiting to record with David Gates and some other people. But yes, I did in fact see
That's a
Amy
funny
Hempel
thing.
And dogs.
Oh, that's funny. She just sent me a picture of her current dog, but who seems like he's obeying. But it's like the smarter Russell Wilson would have turned to everyone and said, like, he could have earned his teammates' respect, which he didn't and doesn't have, if he just said, "Fuck that shit. Let's give it to the beast."
Yeah.
God, that would have been so beautiful. Of course, it might not have worked, but...
It could have led to a fumble that, as everybody's saying, why on earth didn't he just throw it out of bounds?
Exactly. Anyway, it's one of those fascinating, November 22, 1963, what all converged to make this rather amazing moment implode. It's fascinating.
Does sports help you distance yourself from strictly intellectual / academia world?
I think it's a good point.
Not just watching sports, but, again, processing it and making it into...
I think that's a good point.
Not quite a specialty thing, but the physicality of it is something that is anathema to all the professors we know.
Or some of the professors. I mean, a lot of the professors I know, like I'm not...
I've been out of academia for 25 years.
I'm not a Sanskrit scholar. Like I'm a writer who happens to hang his hat within, create a writing program. It's not like I'm, and I'm an intellectual person who's interested in ideas, but I'm not an academic in a traditional sense of, I'm not Harold Bloom who,
Big Yankees fan.
Is he a big Yankees fan?
Yeah.
And that, but I'm not, in a way.
But he doesn't write about it. So
I would say I'm as intellectual as Harold Bloom. I'm as interested in ideas. I'm not as trained as Harold Bloom in terms of things, but, I'm at least as interested in ideas as Harold Bloom, I would say. I'm purely intellectual, but I'm not. The whole point is that the whole T.S. Eliot thing, traditionally individual talent, Eliot says, a serious artist backforms his or her own tradition. That I'm not a scholar who has to know every tradition. I have to find those writers from Catullus to Amy Hempel who matter to me. And that's my tradition. If I find, say, Middlemarch boring, that's fine. I'm not a George Eliot fan. I'm not. Yeah. I don't like Dostoevsky particularly. I just think he's a dull writer, which is, it's not something you're supposed to say if you're a scholar. Like, I'm not, I don't like Paradise Lost. It means nothing to me. Like, that's fine. I'm finding those couple hundred writers and filmmakers who matter to me, and I say those are my people, and I reread them endlessly. So anyway, sports, and I was talking to the poet Nuar Al-Sadar. I don't know if you know her work. She's an amazing Iraqi poet, who is working on this book called Animal Joy, and I had coffee with her yesterday in town, and she's we talked a lot about this idea of animal joy, and I think we all try to get access to animal joy in various ways, whether it's sexually or artistically or maybe through chemicals, and athletic performance. Am I in my early 60s? Am I a serious athlete anymore? Not exactly. No, I just swim and I play tennis and I run, but do I derive, or I walk, do I get animal joy from my athletic activities? I would say no. I'm just trying to stay alive. And then, but this whole sort of physicality of sports is a real thing to me, in a sense that, it's weird still watching the Marshawn Lynch film. I still get chills watching certain Marshawn twists and turns. I mean, that whole vicarious thing is, there's a friend of mine, Noah Cohen, who's written this book about white fandom. It's called something like We Unbeautiful Spectators, or something like, just about how much, then it's called something like Sports and the Cultural Imagination, or something like that. That has a wonderful title going to that we, it's like being a movie watcher, or reading Vogue magazine, or I guess looking at porn, which is sort of like, Marshawn Lynch is just a guy who's, as they say, puts his pants on one leg at a time. But when you're in a spectatorial mode, you imagine that this athlete has transcendental properties.
Oh, let me tell you.
Sounds like that you're a fan too.
Well, no, I was once in a charity basketball game with some players from the New York Giants.
Now, were you a pretty good athlete, or?
Yeah, I will pretend so, but whatever.
Like, did you play high school sports or college?
No, I never did and I went to a bullshit college that I was able to jump center for the basketball team because it was so bad.
Wow. But D3?
No. This is Hampshire College, so the only thing we would have ranked in is ultimate frisbee. That's and hacky sack. But I always
Matthew
played.
Spector at Hampshire when you were?
I don't know the name.
Do you know Matthew? I don't know how old you are. I think the year
48.
The year it's around.
I was there like 90 to 93.
It's around the time that Matthew was there. But anyway,
mid 90s. Charity game at the Hebrew Y with a bunch of the New York Giants. And Tito Wooten, who was a safety for the Giants, he's driving the baseline on offense, throws a pass to the Giant player about the free throw line. Pass gets intercepted. There was one guy on our team who was cherry picking, so our guy who caught the pass throws the ball down court to him, which is about a 75-foot gap, and that guy catches the ball at the free throw line, takes one dribble, goes up for a layup. In that time, Tito Wooten covered the baseline to the opposite side, to the far end of the court, slaps the ball off the backboard, catches it, and comes zooming back down. And that was that moment of, oh, wait a second, they're Olympian gods, even not in the sport that they play. Their physicality and their speed and their way of understanding things is so much different than the rest of us mere mortals.
Exactly.
And it was an instant like that. I'm like, oh, that's why you're a professional athlete and we're a bunch of schlubs.
Exactly. Like it's so funny. I mean, those moments are really powerful to me. Like it's like the moment I have that was slightly similar. I mean, we all have those little things. Like there's only maybe a couple thousand people in the world who could do that, if that.
Yeah.
Like, and that's you forget how, am I among the best couple thousand writers in the world? I would hope so, but one could argue that. But these guys, their bank account would prove they are among the best 1,000 football players in the world. And so, like the one time I was writing, I don't know if you know my essay on this college women's basketball player named Lori Payne.
No.
Anyway, it's in this. It's an essay in my book, Other People Takes and Mistakes, called Being Random is the Key to Life, in which I talk about these two young University of Washington college basketball players. One is named Lori Payne, the other one is named Kayla Burt. And one is very religious, and the other one is undergoing quite serious heart surgery. And the way in which their two lives intersect becomes this sort of fascinating meditation on how to live a life. But as I was researching the piece, I was hanging around with Lori and Kayla for a few weeks. And one time I'm attending their practice. And at the end of their practice, the men's University of Washington team comes on and starts playing. And so I'm just talking to Lori and Kayla and their coach. And at the other end is Nate Robinson. You probably know Nate
as
from,
a Nick guy
from
too.
Nick.
Yeah.
And so, and he isn't even by any means among, well, I think he might be retired now. I don't know if he's still playing.
I don't think his career's ongoing.
But anyway, he's practicing. The men's team start practicing. And I just see out of the corner of my eye, at this point the men's team is actually practicing, and I just see out of the corner of my eye this just insanely fast crossover dribble where he takes a hard step to his left and just zooms past the guy to his right and dunks on 3 or 4 people. And he's 5'9", if that. Mm-hmm. And I just saw I just saw it at the edge of my eye, because I was like a decent high school player, but I had no crossover dribble. I could shoot and I could pass, but I had no quickness. Yeah. It was very slow. And I just saw it. I just knew that was an NBA player. I didn't even know who it was. Like, that's it. Yeah. That tiny quickness in a tight space, temporally and spatially, like, that's it. That's a real thing. Yeah. And it's so real. It's like if you see a great paragraph, it's like not many people can write that paragraph. Like, it's magic, It's amazing.
Yeah, and it's seeing it close up. It's
a good point.
For everything you watch on TV,
it's nothing.
Once you see what the space is really like.
It's tiny.
Yeah.
The space is like between you and me, and you got to fake left and go right in a little fraction of a second faster than anyone else can, and it's that fraction that matters.
And it's knowing what you're about to do after that. It's not
Or
just
feeling it. Yeah,
that you're also going to suddenly, and that's where I'm going to step, and boom, I mean, I saw Jason Kidd once during a Nick game.
Did you have good seats? Or?
Oh yeah, the joke was my pal and I had been buying 10 to 15 game ticket plans of a couple previous years. Stefan Marbury was there. They were shitty 32 and 50 most years. They trade for Kidd. We figure, maybe it'll be 500 this year. They offered us 21 games, lower deck, $25 a ticket. So we were like, what was it, $500 for half a season? Jason Kidd? What the hell? We'll give it a shot. And they ran over the league. When they got to the finals, I was going to be traveling, and my pal didn't want to go to the games without me. So we sold, before the series began against the Lakers, we sold our tickets for $500 a piece, because if the series started and everybody realized how outclassed the Nets were, the tickets would have been worth nothing. So we made back the entire regular season off of one game of the finals.
Was it a 4-game final?
Yeah, they got swept the first time. Second time.
Was that the Kobe Lakers? Or?
Yeah, that was 2001.
Like it wasn't even close.
No. The next year they went 6 against the Spurs, and people act like that was a blowout. I'm like, yeah, but they did take 2 games off of them. But Kidd was chasing down a rebound in traffic.
And you're 12 rows up? Or,
and we see him lunging, like crouching for a ball, and he spins it. He flings it down court 75 feet with spin, such that Lucius Harris, who took off the moment he saw this shot go awry, catches the ball perfectly in stride at the free throw line again, takes one step and lays it in. And it was, Kidd had to chase past another NBA player, be not on the ground, but, doubled over like he's
horizontal
crouched.
Almost.
Yeah. And be able to get the ball down with enough spin that it actually pops up into Lucius Harris's hand 75 feet away. And it's, that's...
And it looked effortless, right?
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like, oh my god,
the whole point was to make it completely smooth, and
then like the whole thing, like, and no one oohed and awed probably, or did they? It was like
at that point we were used to Kidd doing crazy shit, so that was.
To me, it was sort of like I mean, again, we all have these sports narratives, but in a way, that is what I saw Marshawn Lynch do in the Deion Sanders interview, which was, it looked like nothing, but as someone who is really interested in words, who, as I said. I may have said it on Tuesday, I had a really bad stutter as a kid, so I'm very attuned to silence, eloquence, the mouth being strangulated, the mouth being spoken. Like, I knew those 5 minutes had brilliance to them, but they looked effortless, and they looked tossed off the way that we've talked about, that Nate crossover dribble, the giant player running all the way down the court, or the Jason Kidd thing. We've all seen those tiny things. I knew that on a verbal level, Marshawn in those 5 minutes, in my mind, there was genius there. There really was. And, again, that you or your listeners can YouTube it. It comes up, the full Deion interview.
Mm-hmm. Now, through the process of making the film and publicizing, you've also become, we'll say, friends with Michael Smith at ESPN. He did the Q&A with you on this one. I think you'd said he'd done about 4 or 5.
No, just one in Oakland.
Oh, okay. I thought he'd done a couple.
I think we may do, we have become friends.
Well, I think he said he'd seen the movie a few times. So maybe that's
he has seen it several times. He's been been great about it. But we've done 2 public events, and that we text all the time. He's been a passionate supporter of the movie.
Do you feel... have you learned anything from him in terms of media or audience work from the interactions you've had with him on these Q&As? He's a very different... He's used clearly to talking to a crowd and an audience. And I just wonder whether you've had any... I
know. Like he'd say, okay, everyone, give it up for... it's like, I would never do that,
Even the storytelling mode. When you tell anecdotes, it's told in a different mode than what you do, because he's working an audience a little differently.
That's fascinating. I mean, someone else told me that, whereby they said, I think they meant it in a benign way, but it helped. It came across as criticism, which was that they were saying to me, and I didn't take it as criticism, but he was sort of like saying that when Michael Smith talks that he doesn't have any ums or ahs or pauses, that it's totally broadcast ready. Whereas he says that, that when you talk, David, you talk just like yourself and you sound fine, but that you'll stop and you'll wonder and you'll...
Your very first question with Marin, you immediately turn into the, let's start taking your question apart, Mark, and figure out exactly what's going on here, as opposed to, let me give you an answer to that question, Mark.
Which to me is...
it's who you are.
It's human. Like, to me, the moment you go into, well, Mark, it all started on a long and dark winter road. Like, that's just death to me. But, I mean, I forgot how I answered the Marin thing, but anyway, I know what you mean. Like, But anyway, Smith, I'm trying to think if I have learned anything from Michael other than, it was like, I don't know if it was my is his name Clive James? I always get Clive Barnes and Clive James mixed up. They're two
I get Clive Davis after you mentioned Miles Davis. I was about to
but anyway,
direction with that.
Clive Barnes was an old sort of theater critic at the New York Post, probably 50 years ago. But anyway, it moved me a lot when Michael had watched the film the first time, that we have a mutual friend in Kenny Mayne at ESPN, and Kenny sent it on to Michael Smith. And out of nowhere, then Michael watched it and just said, I got to talk to you about this movie. And he called me up a month or two ago and just was, he was just so lyrical about it. And he really put the movie together beautifully, making the connections. He's, I would say probably a generation younger than I am. He's probably in his late 30s, early 40s.
That's what it looks like,
and he's black, he's from New Orleans, he's a member of, he's in the belly of the beast at ESPN.
Well, he's sort of been
on the way, I don't know.
Deplatformed from there.
Yeah, but he had been, I don't know exactly.
You still have to do a lot to get to that.
Totally, and he's from New Orleans, and he's, the fact that it passed muster with him is really meaningful to me. And so, I'm not saying anything I've learned. Like, I don't aspire to be,
that sort of crowd work.
Yeah, but he's great. And that we're continuing to talk about how we can get this film out there. He's trying to get it shown at the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture, and he's just been so generous and thoughtful about it. And I don't know, I'm a big fan. He's great, but it's not like I aspire to a basso profundo voice, which in which I talk in a rather mellifluous, I can't even say it. mellifluous voice, in which I have these lucid paragraphs. Like, I'm more about just thinking. Like, there's an incredible line by John. Why am I forgetting John Cassavetes? It's a brilliant line, actually quoted in Reality Hunger, which Cassavetes partially made a living doing commercial voiceover work. And that he explained that if you just pause before saying a word or a sentence, it sounds to the ear like thinking. Mm-hmm. But it's the way that Cassavetes says it is even better than that. Anyway, the way that I think and talk, it conveys, for better or worse, my consciousness, as we all do. And I guess I'm very distrustful of any too lucid explanation. Yeah. There's a line in my novel, Dead Languages, in which I say, I know this is wrong, but I believe it. Stutterers are truth tellers. Everyone else is lying. I've always liked that line. Not that now I have a very pronounced stutter anymore, but this idea that any too lucid explanation is bullshit. I am mistrustful of anything too mellifluous.
Yeah. Yeah, I just wondered, in some respects, whether you wish you'd been able to work with Michael while you were developing the movie, whether you felt he would have had any insights. largely
that's
because
a whole other. Yeah, I mean that's a whole other movie, or if Marshawn had been part of the package.
Well, yeah, there's that too.
Yeah.
It's something Smith talked about though from his reporting days.
About being in the locker room and stuff.
Yeah, being in the locker room, and hey, if a guy isn't going to answer anything, go to the next locker. It reminded me a little with the Yankees. Michael Kay used to do. He's the TV voice, but he would do the post game locker room stuff. He'd usually leave by the 8th inning, get ready. And there was a big game. Mike Mussina had lost, really tight game, really well pitched. Kay goes to interview him, and this is all according to Kay. Mussina just rolls his eyes and sighs, and Kay just stops and he says to him, "I'll tell you what, Michael. For the rest of your time here with the Yankees, you will never have to go through this again. I will never come down to interview you. This is we're fine. We're done." And just walks away, because the joke was at one point they said, who would be the best guest to bring to Michael's radio show? And they said, "Oh, we'll get Mike Mussina." And that was what prompted Kay to just tell this story. He's like, this guy was such an asshole. He lost the game.
Mussina was?
Yeah, and he would not talk to me as the Yankees broadcaster. And I just told him, for now, the rest of your time with the Yankees,
Bye.
You'll never have to do this again. Thanks. And left.
That's kind of an elegant move. It's like,
I'm not going to put you through this again.
Bye.
You clearly don't want to do this.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. And Mussina's a Stanford guy,
I know,
super intelligent.
He has this sort of mode of, like, I thought the punchline was going to be that Mussina sort of dug it, and that that the ice thawed, but the Mussina...
Nothing.
Well, maybe
just put him in his shit list in those terms. And,
right. I mean, maybe he was doing his own version of beast mode, where basically the smart dog obeys, the smarter dog disobeys. Maybe if you're Richard Sherman or you're Mike Mussina or you're Marshawn Lynch, and you see through the idiocy of 99.99% of sports athlete, sports interview athlete,
well, particularly the locker room
interactions,
scenario.
It's such bullshit. And that Mussina was, he's smart in a different way than, say, Marshawn. It would be more articulated, but it's the same intelligence, which is like, I have X-ray vision. I can see through all this,
right. And it's just in general, when Smith was talking about that, it suddenly put me in the whole mode of, outside of the fact that you have all the athletes there in the room, what possible use is there to locker room interviews? I mean, these are guys who just want to shower, get dressed, get the fuck home, and go on to the next game, or start taking their painkillers so they can make it through another week.
And it's all about animal joy in the sense that it's like asking Yo-Yo Ma, like, how did you, like, he's already laid it down on tracks. Yeah. Like, there's nothing.
What were you feeling when you did that third movement?
There's nothing to say. There's nothing to say. Mm-hmm. And if there is something to say, I know there's nothing to say. That's it.
Yeah.
And Marshawn says that. There's this wonderful moment. He goes, I don't have that much to say, he says in this rather plaintive voice. Like, I don't know, boss. I just don't have that much to say.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think he does have a lot to say, but he'll say it in his own idiom.
Yeah, not through not through that medium, not through the sports writer
discourse. Yeah.
Yeah, or the the giant press conferences
exactly.
sort of thing. Toughest part of making it, outside of the fair use side that you brought up, where did you find it most challenging to make?
That's a good question.
Fear that you were going to go broke.
Yeah, I've sort of touched on those rather obvious ones. The movie cost me probably $120,000 over 4 years. And there's a few $1,000s that I got some help from someone, but it's almost all from my own. I'd sell a book to Germany or something, and then the moment that check would come in, I'd be able to pay for, color correction or sound sweetening or whatever the thing is, or pay my lawyer, who was awfully generous, this amazing IP lawyer named Robert Clarida, who was really unbelievable. But what is the most difficult thing? I think finding, that we went through a lot of film editors on it, people, all of whom helped, but, James Nugent and I did the core of the work, and that I think finding, for the longest time, the film felt big surprise, incoherent, incoherent. It felt like a big compilation of YouTube clips. And it just felt like a baggy monster for the longest time. Mm-hmm. And I gave up on it so many times, emotionally, intellectually, artistically, financially, spiritually. Like, for the longest time, I just felt like this is a waste of time. Like, we tried Black Planet, we tried this, like, pull the cord. Do you know what I mean? I can't tell you how many times that happened. Mm-hmm. In a way, I'm still amazed that we got it out there and that, it's really, if some kid in Topeka, Kansas wants to watch the film, he or she can. That's amazing to me. So the biggest problem, I think, was getting the movie down from 8 hours to 6 to 4 to 3, like, to actually having it be this. I think it's a fairly hard ball of muscle now. It's 84 minutes. I only see maybe 10 to 20 seconds I wish were a little tighter. Mm-hmm. But, like, I don't see that much flab in it.
There's no drag.
Yeah, really, drag is a good word. And that, there's nothing I wish, you kill me with the Brooklyn Nine-Nine stuff. Like, but but the film, this is sort of fancy movie term they call, the film is locked or not. Yeah. But it's like, you can unlock a film. It's not that.
No, and
for us, it would cost us $500 to unlock it. Like, let's say, shout out to HBO. Like, let's say HBO buys it, say, or some big company, and we unlock the movie, and let's say it premieres, say, Super Bowl week of 2020, and it shows on Netflix or something. Obviously we'd make a few final cuts. So I would say it's not a very thrilling answer, but I would just say there's a moment which I can kind of visualize 2 or 3 years ago when it's like, fuck, there's a movie here. Mm-hmm. As it was, again, a lot of collaboration with this wonderful editor, James Nugent, who, like, he helped me get it from about 3 hours where it felt like a potential film to around 2 hours. It's like, this has a Marshawn Lynch, what's called power to weight ratio, that in these 90 minutes, it gets a lot of cultural work done. Mm-hmm. This is no longer, and it's like, that was exciting. I think that was the hardest thing, because is there a story? Sorta. But it just takes a young man from age 15 to age 33. It's like, it's a story of many athletes. Yeah. And into that, we had to interpose an argument about silence and protest, and then a larger thematic vis-a-vis, frankly, lynching, slavery, American history, Black Lives Matter, Trump, lynching,
Oakland.
Prejudice. Oakland is a huge part of it as we go from Oakland to Oakland. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I forget if you asked a question on Tuesday or not.
No, I was just writing things down. Yeah. My whole thing was, I'm not going to ask anything because I'm saving these questions for Saturday.
I'm just here, so I
don't get fined.
Yeah, we'll try to not. That's such a cliche. Like, at this point, people don't even laugh when I say it, like, because it's such a...
You know why I'm here.
Yeah, you know why I'm here. It's such a standard trope at this point.
Mm-hmm. Thinking of doing more film? Or is this okay, I just had no idea if this was enough of an experience that you want to keep pushing it.
I'm working on 2 big projects. I may get my phone just to tell you this one thing. That I don't know if you can hear me over here, but basically I'm working on this film with some wonderful filmmakers. Nicole Walker, Robin Hemley, and Nicole's husband, Eric Sather. They're all writer essayists. And that we all attended the Nonfiction Now Writers Conference in Phoenix in November 1st through 3rd, 2018, just before the midterm elections. And there were 400 writers and scholars at this conference, and we asked as many of them as we could, how do you know what you believe? Do you have any absolute beliefs? Is there such thing as truth? What is nonfiction, and is it true? If you have siblings, have they shown your view of the world to be wrong? Are you superstitious? Do you believe in ghosts? And why are you here and not canvassing for Stacey Abrams? And, people gave us the most amazing answers, and we're editing this. We have, 10 hours of raw footage, just like we had with Lynch. Then of course, the whole challenge will be to intercut it with, of course, all kinds of stuff with Kellyanne Conway saying alt facts. And we're trying to connect, frankly, the last 150 years in the humanities, basically Melville to Dr. Phil, in which we're basically saying there is no longer one transcendental signifier, otherwise known as God. There is no absolute truth. That we all exist in, I would say, a deconstructed reality of subjectivity and relativism, alas, and that basically Trump, of course, et al. Have weaponized that for powerful political theater. And that we're trying to connect the crisis in the humanities to the crisis in nonfiction, the whole, is it true or not? And then connect that to Trumpian political theater and try to avoid making it this film in which we say, art is good, Trump is bad. Yeah. That's not interesting. Right. And so that we're in full production on that. And then I'm working on a second film called Burning Down the Louvre, which is a harder film to summarize, but it's centered around the Paris November 2015 bombings, and trying to explore that. So these are very different from Lynch, but you can probably see the connections. Culture, I don't know. So I'm working on other films too, scripts I'm writing and co-writing. So I'm really heavily into film right now.
Yeah. Does the term "my truth" make you more squeamish than "the truth"?
That's not bad. I mean, that's not a bad term. Because when Giuliani famously said, I don't know if he had been coached, but Giuliani was roundly mocked, when he was on this guy who I can't stand, Chuck Todd, who said, basically Giuliani said, there isn't truth, there are truths, or something like that. Yeah. And then so Chuck Todd says, do you have any idea of how viral this is going to go? You sound ridiculous, but Giuliani, again, I despise Giuliani with every fiber of my being, but Giuliani was saying just an absolute cliche in the humanities from, Nietzsche to Derrida and beyond. That's a given. Yeah. That the perceiver by his very presence alters what's perceived. Heisenberg's fourth law of, Heisenberg's law of uncertainty, or Schrodinger's cat. We can't know what's in the box unless we open, blah, blah, blah. That's just a given. So somehow there's this weird merging of humanities and philosophical and post-structuralist discourse has weirdly, through the right wing, entered political.
Although it did, Ron Rosenbaum did a great piece about it during the 2000 recount. How it turned into...
I'll have to go and look at that.
Oh, yeah. Look at it. It's from the New York Observer. I'll make a note about that,
too. Write me down that
one. Because it was about intentionality.
Wow. That sounds great.
And how his joke was that all this time that I thought W was goofing off at Yale,
he was actually there.
He must have been studying with the same post-structuralist.
Paul Damon.
Yeah.
Wow.
It turns out that the ballot meaning of who you were signifying is not necessarily what you... Yeah.
So it was sort of hugely tongue-in-cheek, but making a point.
But yeah.
Now, that's not on video, is it?
No, that was a piece he did in the New York Observer, I think. Ron lives near here. I'm sure he could still rant about that angrily.
We might have to videotape him.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
In the Ask Me Anything episode we did a couple of weeks ago, your big question was how my being conventionally good-looking has impacted my life. Which
I'm sure that was a weird question.
I saved that for the very final one and went on at length in ways in which I tried not to just say I'm good-looking because I don't want to be that self-aggrandizing.
Right.
How have your looks affected you and your career / outlook? Because I'm assuming that question comes from your side. What do you feel about
How I look?
Yeah, and what impact it's had on you and who you are.
Wow, that's great that you turn it around like that. I'm trying to think. I mean, I'm 63 years old, and I'm bald. I wear glasses. I have acne, in that, I don't have acne as a 63-year-old, but I have acne scars. And so, I'm probably not like conventionally poster boy, but I like how I look. Like, I think I'm interesting looking. I look like myself. I think, people, I always say to my wife, like, how did that person know who I am? And she goes, nobody looks the way, like she just said, nobody, you look unusual. You look like yourself. Although in a way, I'm sort of, there's a kind of a standard way I look, which is, tall, bald, glasses, Jewish, it's sort of like probably a lot of people look like me. There's kind of a look as you get older. If you lose your hair, that you shave your hair, and then you put on glasses to give yourself something to give you some color. You know what I mean? Like, until I went bald, I wore contacts, but then when you don't have hair up here, you have to have something on your head. So
you go with the NBA beard with the shaved head, where the beard just starts out of nowhere. I think Alonzo Mourning was the first guy to really go with beard
horrible,
and shaved head.
I think. Yeah. But like, who's
because it's arbitrary.
LeBron, yeah, it's like I don't have hair here, but I'll have hair here, and I don't have a very heavy beard. But I like how I look. Like, I would say my looks are, I don't know. It's an interesting question. I mean, in Trouble with Men, I play with it a lot, in which I phrase myself as not as beautiful as my wife, who's really pretty, and it's like I'm not, and so that it's an interesting question. I'm trying to take it in some interesting way, other than what comes to mind is my eros is my mind. Like, if there's something galvanizing about me, is that I hope I'm smart, and if I have erotic appeal or something like that, it's like I'm smart, I'm funny, I hope I'm alive, but like I'm not.
How important is having that appeal
to me?
Yeah, because I'm sort of at a point where I
like
don't
who cares?
Yeah,
I mean, if you're saying it for yourself,
yeah,
I know what you mean. Well, I think that's part of what
I like, the approval aspect, but I also recognize that I'm more attractive. Well, it's something I mentioned in the response to that question. I think gay men find me more attractive than straight women do.
That's hilarious. I think that's a funny line.
Yeah,
that when you get hit on, it's by, I know, like, how old are you? Did you say?
48.
48. So, you're, I'm 15 years older than you are. You're married, right?
Yeah.
I'm happily married, I gather. What field is she in?
Photography.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah.
And so, like, I know you mean after a point that you're married and, like, you hope that the couple finds each other attractive, but, like, who cares if, I
don't need the outside validation.
I know what you mean.
The
I think, like, who cares if my graduate student doesn't flirt with me? Like, what difference does it make?
That's what I'm wondering. When you mention the eros of the mind, is that something you still...
Well, I just think, like, when you give... Yeah, I mean, like, you want to be alive, and eros and desire, as you walk through the world, you want to have a galvanizing power in the world, whether through art. It's what's the wonderful Oscar Wilde line, either wear a work of art, be a work of art, or something, like, basically, and so, I mean, it's not that important to me, but, and yet, who doesn't want the world to love himself or herself back? So anyway, I think I've tripled down on art is the point. I'm a total artistic whore. I'll do anything to create a work of art. I went $120,000 into debt on this film, and I'd be thrilled to make my money back. That would be a major success if it broke even. Like, I hope it does even better than that, but I don't expect it to be honest. I mean, even if you sell it to a so-called buyer, it's like you don't get doesn't sell for $12.5 million, a movie like this.
Yeah.
It might if it were, say, I don't know, Get Out or something like that. But, so, but anyway, it's an interesting question. I sort of love that you turn it back on me,
And men can age. Women
that's
can't.
what I hear, that, man, there's a distinguished thing where that when you're 65 and you have, a mane of gray hair, you can look kind of distinguished. And, I really hate it when people say, I don't want to be called sir, or I don't want someone to say, can I help you with that, sir? Or I don't want to be, this weird thing I start to get now is it's supposed, I don't know if it's like a West Coast thing, but people will call me supposedly as a joke, young man, as if I'm so old.
That is weird.
That's fucking weird. Like I'm not 80 and I'm not 18. So like I'm 63. I probably look around 63 or I hope younger, and it's all like, what do you want, young man? As if I'm 90. Like, that's weird. Like,
I'll occasionally use old man if it's one of those Evil and Noir, English club, faux scenarios.
Right.
But yes, no.
That's weird. But anyway.
You did get to meet Lynch briefly after you tell the story, which I'll mention in the introduction, where he did tell you smooth, which could be the great endorsement, the blurb that you put on the movie when you really pushed to sell it. Thing you wish you'd asked him in that scenario, knowing that the movie was already locked down and already showing at that point. Is there something you just thought, let's read a Scullier, anything you wish you'd gotten to?
I know. I know that, I was just, we spoke for almost exactly, I think, 10 minutes, and I was just, relatively present in the moment. I think if I learned anything from making the movie over 4 years, it's sort of like that. I guess I'd reject the premise of the question in the sense that, like, okay, if only I had asked him this.
Oh, not even in relation to the documentary.
I know.
Or actually
No, but even like, it's sort of like the movie has taught me, there's a wonderful line a long time ago from Pete Carroll, his former coach, who's basically said, if you really listen to Marshawn Lynch, he's telling you everything that you need to know, either through what he doesn't say or through what little he says. And that we tried to find that on videotape, but I think it was just something he said to a reporter. But that's, in a way, we just follow, or that wonderful line of Marshawn saying, I just read it, which is so great. I just read it. The way he says it with a certain question mark, I just read it. Like
Carol keeps trying to tell him, and it's going to open on the right side, and you can do this and this.
I just read it.
Yeah.
And then he says it again, and then kind of beautifully, Carol, I think, to me, finally gets it. He just starts laughing and goes away. It's kind of a beautiful moment, I have to say.
Oh, I thought it was again, one of those keys. If we're going to apply a key to Marshawn Lynch, it was
read it. So, but like, I know what you mean. Like, before, people would definitely ask me that question, and I would always either answer, no, that's not relevant, or I'd say, how did you like the movie? I wanted to know. But he told me that, in our exchange, and that he liked. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he essentially liked the movie. Probably more than like the movie. And so, what is that big question? I feel like I know the answers. Is like when I've done profiles of Ichiro and Phil Jackson and, the radio broadcaster Delilah and like various people I've interviewed, it's sort of like, I know the answers at a certain point. Like, I don't know, is there a question you wish you wish I had asked him, Gil, or is there a question you had that you may not be the Marshawn Lynch scholar?
No, but I think, like you posed throughout the entire movie, this is a guy who was using silence to say an awful lot.
A hell of a lot.
Need to, again, I think it would be more was there anything that surprised you about those 10 minutes that, that's
just how alive they were. Like it was just his command of the physical space was amazing. Like,
again, that's an athlete thing, especially,
exactly.
But there's also the connotation that Michael Smith brought up relating that whole anecdote where there were a bunch of black men and you were the one white guy in that scenario.
And he really, it was an electrified fence. Like the Marshawn came in Michaelstown, which I guess is true, he stood very close to me. And I think he was a little smaller than I would have thought. Like, I think...
He's only 5'10", 5'11".
He's 5'10", 3/4", and he's, obviously very broad, but like, I'm around 6 feet. I definitely felt taller than he was, which was sort of strange, because like I'm 20, let's see, he's, I'm 30 years older than him. And so like, I felt like I was sort of, I don't know if all that football has pushed him down a little bit, but he's like probably around 5'10". And, he's just he's not as tall as I would have thought. But he commands the physical space in a remarkable way. And he sort of galvanizes the space and electrifies it. And, he's he's a magnetic human being, and that, the most amazing thing that he did was that thing, which was so gracious when he said, I'm going to go stand over next to you so that you don't feel we all ganging up on you. Yeah. It was so beautiful. I actually had not felt that at all. I felt like I felt it was quite a positive and fun conversation, but that's amazing to me, to break the fourth wall that way. I don't know. That was pretty lovely, I thought.
I enjoyed the hell out of the film. I will tell everybody I know to watch it and send them a little Amazon and iTunes links and Vimeo, but I'll leave you to it. David, thanks so much for coming back on the show.
Thank you, Gil.
And that was David Shields. Go check out Marshawn Lynch, A History, on Amazon Video, iTunes, and Vimeo. There are links in the show notes to all those, but you can just search it out on those sites or apps. It really is an amazing project and a labor of love, so I hope it finds a wide audience. You can go to David's site, davidshields.com, to find more of his writing and some of the books that we talked about in the bio for him, including The Trouble with Men. Now, after we wrapped, I asked him, so, who you been reading? If you want to hear his answer to that, which tends to divagate the way David's conversation does, you'll need to become a supporter of the Virtual Memories Show so you can get access to our quarterly bonus podcast, Fear of a Square Planet. The second quarter 2019 episode is live and features an hour of book recommendations and fun conversation with Mark Allen Stamety, David Shields from the last time he was on, Michael Carroll, Frederick Tutton, Ursi Soteropoulos, Caitlin Foisey, Seth, Nina Bunjevac, Stephen Guarnacha, Hugh Ryan, Bill Griffith, Boris Fishman, and Barbara Nessim. You can support the Virtual Memories Show via patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod. There are all sorts of goals and goodies in place for patrons, including the bonus podcasts and plenty more. So go to patreon.com/VMSpod and support the art of fine conversation. Now, I recorded this at David's Hotel in the Lower East Side, so I had the George Washington Bridge toll plus parking at the only municipal garage left in Manhattan on Essex Street. So the whole thing added up to about $35 or so. Oh, yeah, I got a coffee over at Irving Street Roasters nearby. So $40 or so. I also bought a book at McNally Jackson Bookstore, which is where I bumped into Patti Smith and immediately pitched her on recording a show because I had all of my promo postcards and my gear with me. We'll see if that works out. So if you want to help defray some of the costs of the Virtual Memories Show, like web hosting, travel, equipment, coffee, or just toss me some money because you think the show is worth it, then visit patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod and make a one-time or recurring donation. A special thanks go out to Nick Bartosik, Buzz Carter, Michael Hacker, Michael Janizik, Fred Kish, Jonathan Kranz, Kevin Katila, Jack Lescamella, Stephen Nadler, Barbara Nessim, Jim Ottaviani, Payne Prophet, Dmitry Samarov, Stephen Solomon, Greg Tanner, Ford Thomas, Armando Veve, and Garrett Zecker for going over and above in their support of the Virtual Memories Show. We have the full list of show supporters at chimeraobscura.com/VM. Our music for this episode is Fella by Hal Mayforth, used with permission from the artist. You should visit my archives to check out my episode with Hal from the summer of 2018 and learn more about his art and painting. And you can listen to his music at soundcloud.com/May4th. And that's MAY4TH. And that's it for this week's episode of the Virtual Memories Show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with another great conversation. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show and download past episodes at the iTunes Store. You can also find all our episodes and get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. You can also follow the Virtual Memories Show on Twitter and Instagram at vmspod, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on YouTube, Spotify, and TuneIn.com by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And if you like this podcast, please tell your pals, talk it up on social media, and go to iTunes, look up the Virtual Memories Show, and leave a rating and maybe a review for us. It all goes to helping us build a bigger audience. You've been listening to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth. Keep reading, keep making art, and keep the conversation going.